Welcome back to A Closer Look with Tom and Terry, where we explore the fascinating stories, mysteries, and moments that shape our world, one conversation at a time. I'm Tom.
And I'm Terry. Thanks for joining us. Today we're taking a look at one of the most unsettling and persistent UFO cases in American history, the alleged abduction of two men from Pascagoula, Mississippi in October 1974.
That's right, their story has become one of the most famous and controversial encounters ever reported. Two working men, a quiet evening of fishing after work, and then something completely unexplainable.
Even decades later, their account continues to spark debates among ufologists, skeptics, and investigators. Tonight, we'll retrace the events of that evening, explore who these men were, and consider the leading theories that might explain what really happened that night on the Pascagoula River.
Let's start by setting the scene. It was a cool evening in October 1974 along the Pascagoula River, a peaceful, industrial stretch of water in southern Mississippi that emptied into the Gulf.
Right, just an ordinary day turning into a quiet night. Two coworkers, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, decided to go fishing after work. Both men were employed at the nearby shipyard, building and repairing boats along the Gulf Coast.
Charles Hickson was 42 years old at the time, a family man and a hard worker. He was a foreman at the shipyard, respected by his colleagues, not given to fantasy or wild stories. Calvin Parker was just 19, new on the job, and engaged to be married.
They weren't exactly thrill seekers. These were regular, blue-collar guys who just wanted to unwind. So they packed up their rods, drove out toward the riverbank, and settled in for a few hours of fishing under a quiet Mississippi sky.
Around 9 p.m., as the story goes, they were settling in when they heard a strange, high-pitched whirring sound, something mechanical, but not like any engine they recognized. When they turned to look, they claimed to see an oval-shaped craft hovering just above the ground, glowing blue and about 30 to 40 feet long. Then, a bright light engulfed them.
And that's when, according to both men, three beings emerged from the craft. The creatures weren't described as little green men, far from it. Hickson and Parker gave remarkably detailed descriptions. Humanoid figures, about 5 feet tall, with skin that looked wrinkled and textured like elephants, no visible necks, and claw-like hands.
They also described the beings having slit-like mouths and ears and moving in a stiff, robotic fashion, almost like they were gliding or floating rather than walking. Then, both men claimed they were seized, one by each arm, and pulled toward the craft. Hickson said he felt momentarily paralyzed, his body numbed. Parker, overcome with fear, fainted almost immediately.
When Hickson regained awareness, he found himself inside the craft. He described a bright room, sterile and metallic, with what looked like a large floating eye or device scanning his body. He said it felt like a medical examination, though no physical tools touched him.
After what felt like minutes, though Hickson estimated later that it may have been half an hour, he was released back to the riverbank. Parker came to shortly after, both of them shaken, terrified, and unsure what just happened to them.
They reportedly sat in silence for a while, trying to make sense of it all. But they decided to report it, something neither man really wanted to do. They knew how strange it would sound.
Exactly. That decision changed their lives. Around 10:30 p.m., they drove straight to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. The sheriff on duty, Fred Diamond, later said both men appeared visibly frightened, pale, trembling, and sweating.
To test their story, the deputies left the two men alone in a room with a hidden recorder, hoping to catch them contradicting themselves. But instead, they captured something entirely different. Two men still deeply terrified, quietly praying and questioning what had happened to them.
That recording has since become one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in UFO history. They didn't sound like men rehearsing or inventing anything. They sounded traumatized.
The next morning, the local newspaper ran the story, and by evening, Pascagoula had become a national media circus. Reporters from across the country descended on that small Mississippi town.
Hickson, in particular, found himself thrust into the spotlight. He spoke openly to journalists, appearing on television and in print interviews, even undergoing hypnosis and polygraph exams.
Calvin Parker, on the other hand, hated the attention. He was just 19. Overnight, he became the unwilling face of an alien abduction case. Through the decades, he largely avoided publicity, moving away and staying mostly silent for years at a time.
But he eventually broke his silence again in the early 2000s after decades of reflection. What's remarkable is that both men, despite their time apart and all the skepticism, never significantly changed their core account.
So let's talk about that, Tom. This story has inspired countless theories, some quite serious, some a little out there.
Sure, we can break them down into three general categories: psychological, physical, and extraterrestrial. Let's start with the psychological.
Psychologists who have looked at the Pascagoula case often point to the possibility of shared stress or panic-induced hallucinations. The idea is that something startling, say a strange light or an aircraft, might have triggered an intense episode of fear in both men.
It's plausible. They were fishing at night in an isolated area. A misinterpreted stimulus, fatigue, and fear could trigger a shared perception of danger. But the challenge is that both men's accounts remained consistent under hypnosis and years apart, and medical exams showed physical signs consistent with stress trauma, like elevated cortisol and temporary muscle tension.
And the sheriff's deputies, remember, they independently confirmed that they looked genuinely frightened long before any media circus began. That makes it difficult to dismiss as a pure fabrication.
Then there's the physical or environmental explanation. In the 1970s, Pascagoula was home to a number of experimental aircraft tests, both private and military. Some skeptics believe they might have seen a prototype drone or craft from nearby bases, illuminated by spotlights or reflections on the water.
That theory gained some traction after declassified documents revealed that the Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi occasionally conducted night training exercises in the region during that period. But even those craft wouldn't explain the creatures, unless, of course, the men hallucinated or misinterpreted humans in specialized suits.
It's also worth noting that multiple residents reported seeing unusual lights along the coast around that same week, though none described any direct encounters.
And that brings us to the idea people most associate with this story.
Right. For many believers, the consistency and sincerity of Hickson and Parker's accounts are compelling. UFO researchers point out that the beings they described do not match the popular gray alien image. It was unlike anything in 1970s pop culture.
Which suggests, some argue, that it wasn't borrowed from fiction, and the highly mechanical and emotionless nature of those entities, combined with the floating movement, fits what some abductees have later described as non-human or biomechanical life forms.
One lesser-known detail, both men reported a faint humming sound before and after the encounter, which might indicate propulsion or energy discharge. Some UFO investigators develop theories about electromagnetic interference near the site, although those claims remain speculative.
Still, without physical evidence, no photos, no soil samples, nothing tangible, the case remains a matter of belief more than proof.
In the years that followed, Charles Hickson regularly spoke about the event, even publishing a book detailing his experience. He passed away in 2011, holding firm to his story until the end.
Calvin Parker, meanwhile, reemerged later in life. He wrote his own account in 2018, emphasizing that he had spent decades trying to move past it. He said he didn't care whether people believed him, he just wanted peace. He passed away in 2023, also never recanting his claims.
And that's what makes it enduring. Every retelling, every investigation, every new theory, It's part of an ongoing effort to bridge that gap between belief and evidence.
Exactly. Maybe we'll never know for certain what happened along the Pascagoula River in 1974, but it's a reminder of how vast and mysterious the world and maybe the universe still is.
So, as we close tonight's episode of A Closer Look with Tom and Terry, we leave you with a question. What would you have done in their place? Would you have gone public or kept it to yourself?
However you answer, one thing is certain. The story of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker will always stand as one of the most compelling unsolved encounters in modern American folklore.
Thanks for spending your time with us. Join us next week when we spotlight another case that challenges how we see the world around us.
Until then, stay curious and keep looking closer.